Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order and welcome you to the Coeur d'Alene School District 271 board meeting for January 7th, 2019. Would the gentlemen please remove their hats and everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you for being here with us tonight. Before we get going, I'm just going to introduce our participants. Starting at my far right is Miss Lynn Town, Clerk of the Board, and Mr. Steve Cook, Superintendent. To my immediate left is Tom Hearn, our Vice Chair, Miss Lisa May, Board Member, Miss Tamber Pickford, Board Member, and Miss Jen Brumley, Board Member. My name is Casey Morris-Rowe, and I'm our Board Chair. Public comment on district-related items is scheduled near the start of tonight's meeting. Please sign in on the sheet provided at the entrance door. Because of the diversity of issues, members of the board will not respond to public comment made during tonight's meeting. Instead, issues may be recorded and referred to the proper staff person for follow-up. Comments may also be submitted to the board in writing through our clerk, Ms. Lynn Town. Okay, Ms. Town, no addendum tonight, correct? Okay. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, Ms. Town. Okay. So, as you may recall, we've had just a change in the law as far as our organization of our board, and so now that's shifted from January 1 through December 31st. So all the things we used to do at our July meeting need to be done tonight, and so we're going to do that first. And we're going to do that to music. All right, let's see. I just need to pull up my sheet here. So we're going to elect a board chair for the 2019 calendar year, a vice chair, and then we need to appoint our treasurer, our clerk of the board, custodian of public records, and acting clerk. So any discussion? Why don't we start on chair and we'll just work our way down through on the list on page 4 there.
Well, I move to elect Casey Morris-Rowe as board chair for the 2019 calendar year. How about that for discussion? Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay. No, thank you guys. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I'm going to vote no, and I want to be clear. It's not personal to Casey. It's if you recall, in October I made a motion to term limit the chair to 2 years. It was failed. The board didn't pass that, but I do believe we need to continue to have a term limit. So I'm going to vote no. And also, kind of contrary to some of the online comments, I'm not interested in being chair myself. That wasn't the purpose of that motion in October. There were some comments, though, that online comments that said that was the issue, and that was not the issue. So I want to be real clear. It's not personal to you, Casey. I just feel like we need a term limit to 2 years. So I'm voting no.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hearn. Okay. How about vice chair?
I nominate Lisa May.
I second that.
Okay. Any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Congratulations, Lisa. You'll be our vice chair. Why don't we work through this and then we'll swap seats with you and Tom?
Huh?
Or we don't have to tonight if we
can
don't
do
want
that.
to. Okay.
We can
And we'll just swap next month?
Okay.
And then the other ones are fairly standard in here. Someone wants to tackle those.
I'll move to elect Catherine Hebner, treasurer for the 2019 calendar year. Move to elect Lynn Town.
Let's do one at a time, sorry. Yep.
All right.
Second.
Just trying to make it fast.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Now we can do the next.
Oh,
Move to elect Lynn Town, clerk of the board for the 2019 calendar year.
second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay.
I move to designate Lynn Town as custodian of public records for the 2019 calendar year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I move to appoint Pamela Westberg as acting clerk in the event of absence of the board clerk for the 2019 calendar year.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move that the regular meeting of the board for calendar year 2019 be the first Monday of the month at 5 p.m. at the Midtown Center Meeting Room, 1505 North 5th Street, Coeur d'Alene, unless otherwise posted for public notice in advance of the meeting.
Okay, any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Couple more here.
Third Monday of the month be set aside for special meetings, workshops, and board forums as needed.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Last one here.
I move to designate the district administration office as the public place for posting of this board's public notices. Additionally, notices will be posted in the main lobby at Midtown Center, the District 271 website, and social media platforms. The Coeur d'Alene Press and the Spokesman Review newspapers will be provided the meeting agendas at the time of the posting.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Just have a clarification question on that, Ms. Town. Do we also post at the library still? Or is that no longer required?
That is no longer required.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the other thing we'll do tonight is our code of ethics. Ms. Town will give that to each one of us at the end of the meeting tonight and just ask that you sign those. Oh,
already
we
have
have them already. So if you can just sign those, and we'll give those back to Ms. Town. Okay. All right, next up is our board recognition. And Dr. Cook, are you going to go first here? Okay.
All right, the Board of Trustees would like to present the Inspiration Award today to the Coeur d'Alene Backpack Program. Come on up, guys. Everybody, come on up. Yep. Yeah. Come on up here. All right, so we got a lot here, so. Program Director Sherry Bullock is here tonight, along with Joyce Dexter, the Lake City Church Food Bank Manager, and Kristen Ludwig, a volunteer and social media guru for this program. Also, James Kerb is here tonight. All right, about the backpack program. This benefits school-aged children whose families may be experiencing financial hardships and do not have dependable food source during the weekends and holiday vacations. Children are identified by school staff and asked if they wish to and are willing to participate. And at the end of school on Fridays, these students are sent home with a nondescript bag filled with non-perishable, child-friendly, nutritious food for the weekend. This began 8 years ago with the Lakes Middle School as the pilot school. On the very first time, 16 students there received the weekend food packs. Today, volunteers with the backpack program quietly supply over 400 students with packs of food each Friday. 400 students. Think about that. This is accomplished in partnership with Second Harvest, Lake City Church, and Lake City Community Food Bank. The backpack program serves students in all of our 11 elementary schools and at Lakes and Canfield middle schools. The program also partners with the school district's Hope on the Home Front and CdA for Kids after-school programs during the summer. Close to half of all families in our school district fall below the poverty line, and almost 4,000 students qualify for free or reduced lunch and breakfast throughout the National School Lunch Program in our school district. The Coeur d'Alene Backpack Program strives to continue to expand to serve as many children in need as possible in our community. On the program's website, you can find several ways to help. $17 a month can prevent one student from going hungry. $204 can sponsor a student for an entire school year. You can donate food. You could donate time. Any business or group that wants to be a part of this could also sponsor a fundraiser as well. For helping meet the needs of hungry children in our community by providing weekend backpacks filled with nutritious foods for more than 400 students in the Coeur d'Alene Public School District, we proudly present the Coeur d'Alene Backpack Program with the board's Inspiration Award. Get over here. Let's get a picture, and then I want to hear something from you guys. Sherry, you've been doing this for a minute, right? Talk a little bit about how the evolution of this program has happened over the few years.
Okay, so, well, almost 9 years ago now, James and I met, which I heard about the backpack program, which is a national program through Feeding America, and Lake City is my home church, and so the food bank was the first sort of step in my journey to see if we could make this happen. I was introduced to James. We within probably a couple of weeks of meeting, got in touch with Chris Hammonds, who was then the principal at Lakes, and he was like, let's do it. And so that first year, actually maybe almost 2 years, any random items that came along in the food bank that wasn't enough for families would just be put aside. We'd stuff them in backpacks. We started with 16 kiddos, and then every single year the program has grown since then. We've also expanded to Plummer Worley School District, and so we have 40 kiddos there in their elementary school that get food. And so Second Harvest then got into the picture because there was sort of this renewed interest in backpack programs and sending food home for kids. And so then they were able to provide the food for us at a reduced cost. And so I brought a bag because I think somebody asked me to. Anyway, they were hungry. So I don't know, I can sort of show you. So this is what the food comes in from Second Harvest, already packed for us from their volunteers. And so this is what the kids get home every weekend. Other than during Thanksgiving, Christmas, and spring break, we do supplemental packs, and this is food that's donated us through the year. Blue Dog RV every single year sponsors our Christmas packs, and as well as Post Falls and Rathdrum, and so they purchase all the food. We have groups for those 3 events that come in and pack and all of that sort of stuff. So I'll just sort of line it up. Oh yeah. So Joyce will line it up here and show you guys. This is what they go home with. You know, when we say nutritious, we try and keep it as nutritious as possible. We want them to eat it, and we also want them to be able to make it on their own. And so obviously there's no perishable items in there. So we have 2 like pasta dishes. This is macaroni and then a beefaroni. Again, they can heat this up on their own. We do have some kindergartners, so I mean, and some of these kids are legitimately on their own making this food and preparing for the weekend, so we want it to be as self-sufficient as possible for them. And then we have like a little fruit cup here, some carrots. We've got shelf-stable milk, 2 regular milks and 1 chocolate milk, along with 2 multigrain cereal, and then some snacks. So let's see, blueberry lemon crisps, some beef jerky, and granola bar. This changes a little bit semester by semester depending on the contracts that Second Harvest can get with their suppliers and for the biggest bang for our buck. So that is what 1 student will go home every week. If there's more than one student in the family throughout any of our schools, then every single child in that family goes home with their own pack. And we do have families, large families, some even families of 6, where they will meal plan for the week together with this food as well.
Well, hold on. James, talk just a little bit about what this has meant for our students across the district.
It's a blessing to be able to look at a family or a small child and just say, hey, look, we've got something for you. It's heartbreaking when there's nothing else out there. And so this just provides one more safety net to help get people back on their feet so that they can focus on what's really important, and that is family matters. We're just trying to strengthen our children and families as much as possible. And when they're worried about food, they can't focus on the other things in their life. So hopefully this will offer them an opportunity to get beyond the more basic needs. And yeah, it's such a blessing. So proud.
On behalf of the school district and the Board of Trustees, thank you all very, very much. Thank you. All right. And that's it for our recognitions tonight.
And I am up next with our Teacher of the Month Awards and our Shining Star Awards. And I just want to thank you guys, the Coeur d'Alene Backpack Program, for all that you do. And I just was thinking of today would have been my mother-in-law's 69th birthday. And we will be celebrating with yellow cake and chocolate frosting as a tradition when I leave here in honor of her. But also in honor of her, as I was thinking about our teachers and Shining Star community members such as you guys. She lived by many things, but what she represented and always said was, pour out yourself daily for others. And you guys are a perfect example of doing that, and I thank you so much for pouring yourself out daily for our community, and also for the teachers that we're going to recognize. They do that every single day. Even when they're not in the classroom, they are pouring themselves out daily. Sleepless nights, worries from littles not having food and whatnot. You know, they know everything, every little detail about each kid that walks in their door. So we are so grateful to have the educators that we do in our school district pouring into our youth. So our first Teacher of the Month, and I'm probably going to mess up a lot of these names. I really tried to make some notes, but for December, Sig Pankey, special education teacher at Bryan Elementary. This was awesome. He had no idea it was a big Christmas breakfast in the morning, and all the teachers were there, and they called him up, so it was fun. Anyways, and the second Teacher of the Month for December, 6th grade teacher at Canfield Middle School is Allie Robitaille. And Teacher of the Month, December, Lake City High School, Brad Kerr, computer teacher. And then our Shining Star Employee of the Month, we haven't been doing these. I mean, we have been doing these, but so I'm going back to mention September's, is Susie Bam. I probably messed that up. Classroom assistant at Winton Elementary School. And then our next Shining Star is Carlos Gonzalez, Employee of the Month for October, Special Education Paraprofessional at Canfield Middle School. And Holly Irwin for November, Title I Assistant at Fernand STEM Academy. And Nicole Olson, Employee of the Month, December, Curricula and Assessments Assistant at the District Office. So we are so grateful to them and all of our other wonderful educators we have in our Coeur d'Alene School District. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pickford. Next up is our high school student body reports, and I'll have Coeur d'Alene High School first, please.
And organize the details of the event. We want to invite you to our school at Friday at 5 to participate in the annual Healthy Rivalry between us and Lake City. It should be a great night. After Fight for the Fish, we'll be wrapping up the semester. Finals are in 2 weeks, and our students will continue to study very hard throughout the end of the semester. To kick off the new semester, however, we want to start our annual winter dance on February 2nd. This year, we're going to be trying something new and making it optional to have casual or semi-formal at the dance. We're hoping that this can increase participation from our school, and we're planning on 80s neon theme. We're excited to be hosting yet another dance this year. Basketball and wrestling are still in full swing, and our teams are doing very well. In addition, Viking Army started today, so our football players are already getting ready for another outstanding season. Thank you for having us here tonight. We appreciate your time. We'll see you next month.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. How about Lake City High School? Good evening.
Good evening, esteemed board chair, honorable trustees, superintendent Cook, and district administration. My name is Amani Pereira, and I am the ASB president at Lake City High School. Also with me tonight are ASB secretary Chloe Teets and ASB treasurer Claire Mitchell. Our ASB vice president Emma Bull is out of town and couldn't be here tonight. We've been busy at Lake City getting ready for Fight for the Fish this Friday at CHS, and we'll be starting our Kiss the Fish fundraiser on Wednesday for our donation to the Human Rights Task Force during the games. LC also has a new finals schedule this semester that was created by a staff innovative team and approved by the building leadership team. Instead of taking 4 finals over 2 days, as in the past years, this year students at LC will take two finals per day over a period of 4 days, with additional class time for finishing content and review built in. Students and staff are all excited about this new system that will start next Friday and make finals more manageable for students and teachers alike. We also have several things going on in our college and career office. Lake City is hosting 20 college and career advisors from across the region on January 23rd. This first ever regional meeting was organized by LC College and Career Advisor Ms. Delgizi. During the next few weeks, Ms. Delgizi will also be going into classrooms to help students interpret their PSAT results. She has also created a free after-school prep opportunity starting next month for LC students to receive content preparation in math and English, along with tips, strategies, and practice for the SAT twice a week for 8 weeks leading up to the test. This is an incredible program she's created, and we're so grateful for her for providing it to our students. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight, and we'll see you again next month.
Okay, thank you. Is anyone from K-Tech here tonight? Okay. Mr. Twitchell, we're going to move on to the CEA report.
Alrighty, thank you very much. Board Chair Morrisroe, board members, Superintendent Cook, and distinguished district office employees, once again, as always, thank you very much and Happy New Year to you all. And I hope everyone's gotten your New Year's resolutions all figured out. Mine this year is a little different than what I've done in the past. In the past, I've made the goal to lose weight. That hasn't been working. So instead, I'm going to try to get everyone around me to gain weight so I just appear to be thinner. So we'll see how that works. With the break that we just had, don't have too much to talk about, which will help keep the meeting short overall. First off, with the levy, we're very excited that the numbers have been finalized, and the CEA is looking forward to working with the district and the board and the community to make sure it gets passed. We've seen a lot of strong support from the community in the past on this, and we're confident it will pass, but we know work still needs to be done to educate everybody on what especially the additional money will be going towards. There's also been going on, we just kind of got finished up in all the buildings with evaluation time. With the state law, 2 of them having to be done each year. And as always, there's been some concerns from staff members about that, but we're certainly working through those with the administrators and with Superintendent Cook on some of the issues. Like I say, nothing major, but that's just the way it goes. As discussed too, we have finals coming up soon, and so while today certainly was a rough day, not just for students, but also for teachers coming back after the break, we are excited to be very near the halfway point. So that's a bonus for all of us, and even for all of you, I'm sure, getting excited about it. Halfway to somewhat of a break. The second thing I want to talk about is something that I've talked about before, and that is let's get high school starting later. The evidence is very clear. Last month, spread throughout media, was an article about the Seattle School District, which they moved to a later start time. And if you don't mind me reading a little bit of this, beginning with the 16-17 school year, the district moved official start times for middle and high schools nearly an hour later, from 7:50 to 8:45. Currently, our high schools start at about 7:30. 7:35 officially is when the tardy bell rings. But so we're about 20 minutes earlier than what they were to begin with. And they flat out say it wasn't easy to do. There certainly were some barriers that had to be talked out, worked through. It meant rescheduling extracurricular activities and bus routes, but the bottom line goal was met. Teenagers used the extra time to sleep in. And I know teenagers get a bad rep for being tired all the time and sleeping all the time, but that's just their natural cycle. So what did they find? They found improvement in grades and a reduction in tardiness and absences. One of the things that really stood out to me too in this article was the fact that it especially helped the lower socioeconomic families. The students that are from low socioeconomic families have a lot more issues with getting to school on time. And so by having that extra hour in the morning, it benefited them greatly. We just got done seeing a fantastic presentation to the group that provides meals to these students. We need to do all we can to help them, and this shows that it helped them immensely. You know, I could go on and on about this. The big thing I'm hoping for is that, you know, we can just get an official discussion started on this. When my wife and I first got married, someone told us if you wait till you can afford to have kids, you're never going to have them. I would say if we wait until we're not busy to discuss this, we're never going to discuss it. We're always going to be busy. There's always going to be things on the plate. We have to make this a priority to benefit the students. Granted, I love getting out earlier in the day at the time that we officially get done now. And I know this would push it back an hour, but it would be worth it because it'd be for the students. Oh, and if we, you know, and again, I've told you guys, the very first time I talked about it, I said I'm going to keep going on this. And if you guys would like, you know, just let me know, and I'm sure I could have 15 to 20 pediatricians, child psychologists, whatever, to come here and speak for the 3 minutes each. So just let me know if you'd like to hear that, because I could arrange it. Lastly, on April 5th and 6th of this year, I think I've mentioned this before, but we are proud that Coeur d'Alene is going to be hosting the Idaho Education Association Delegate Assembly. One of the big things that happens at that at the Delegate Assembly, which will be happening at the resort, is there's an auction for the Children's Fund. The Children's Fund is a fund with all donated money, and when a IEA CdA member sees a student in need of virtually anything that's affecting their ability to function in the classroom to their fullest ability, we make a phone call, and usually within a week they send a check for it. So it could be shoes or whatever. Go buy the shoes, give them to the kid, and that's it. Like I said, it's all donated money. In the past, for the Delegate Assembly, being held down in Boise, is where, of course, because the world revolves around Boise, a lot of the school boards put together a basket or something that could be auctioned off on that. So I'm going to right here challenge all of you, school board, to put together a basket, and it could be anything. You know, heck, maybe even throw a gift certificate for a brand new boat in there or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas. But I'll send you all an email and with a link to the Children's Fund as well. And if anybody is watching or listening and would like to donate something to that as well that can go to that auction, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Twitchell. Okay, Board of Trustee comments. So it looks like we didn't have anything submitted. Is that correct? Okay. So, time for public comment. Just want to remind the public, while this is a meeting of the Board of Trustees that takes place in public, it is not a meeting with the public. It is a meeting of the board to conduct district business. The board does allow some limited public comment on district-related items. Those wishing to address the board during the public comment period are limited to one comment not to exceed 3 minutes. If you have additional comments that you'd like to present to the board, you may do so in writing through the clerk of the board, Ms. Lynn Town. Please keep in mind that board members will not respond to public comment. If I determine that an individual statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, or repetitive, I may terminate that speaker's privilege to address the board. Okay, and we just have one person signed up tonight, Dr. Sarah Morrow. Welcome. Nice to have you here again. I have a feeling Mr. Twitchell's going to like what you have to say.
Hi there. Good evening. Thanks for having me or letting me be here. Mr. Twitchell, you're probably going to keep seeing me until I see action on this issue. I'm a doctor of psychology. I'm a child and family specialist. I provide therapy services and have done so in Coeur d'Alene for almost 15 years. And I'm so sad to see how many of my teenagers I work with are incredibly depressed and hopeless simply because they're exhausted. They're exhausted because they cannot biologically make themselves fall asleep at 9 p.m. to get the sleep they need to be up by 6 a.m. It's not their fault. They just can't biologically do that. We know during adolescence there's a 2-hour shift towards nocturnal. Melatonin production doesn't start till around 9 or 10 in the evening. Most teenagers cannot fall asleep before 11 p.m. So it's not a matter of bad behavior, staying up late, it's a matter of biology. So I'd like to share with you some statistics. I did come in last time with policy statements for you from the American Psychological Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the Center for Disease Control. There are actually 16 regulatory bodies and agencies in our country, all geared around health and well-being of children, and they all say that school for adolescents should never start before 8:30 in the morning. There are 0 agencies that recommend a school start time before 8:30. 0. There are 16 bodies that say we should not have teenagers in school before 8:30. There's many reasons for this. The American Academy of Pediatrics stated that later school start times is one of the most easily fixable public health issues facing our country. We can do this. It is being done. There's been over 1,000 high schools in our country shift to later start times across 44 states. Not a single program to date has chosen to go back to early start times. High school used to start later. It was a change in the 1980s towards earlier times, and we can go back, and it can be much better outcomes for our community. We know with certainty, the evidence is overwhelmingly clear that early start times for teenagers causes harm, not only to them, but to the community they live in and to their families. We know that those early start times cause poor attendance, more behavioral issues and violence, more drug use and delinquency, higher rates of car accidents and dangerous behavior, more injuries and illnesses, increased depression and suicidal ideation, obesity, teen pregnancy, lower grades, lower SAT scores, lower college attendance, and more family conflict. 92% of parents who had their teenagers go to school later said their teenager was easier to live with. Almost all of them. Have you tried to arouse a child or a teenager at 6 in the morning? It can be really unpleasant. It can lead to a lot of conflict because parents are scared, they're anxious, they can't get their child to function, to succeed. So we know that if teenagers get 1 hour of extra sleep, we see graduation rates increase by 13%, and college attendance rates increase by 9%. That's hundreds and hundreds of kids from our community every year. We see a reduction in car accidents on average of 13%, but one school saw their car accident rate for students go down by 70%, with 220 fewer tardies each morning. Every day, over 200 fewer tardies starting the day. We know that adolescents cannot really fall asleep until around 11 at night, and their brains actually stay in sleep mode until around 8 a.m. So even though we make them get up at 6, they are not fully cognitively functioning until around 8 a.m. And please ask any teacher what their first period students are like academically, their attention, their focus, their work drive. It's not good. Teens need between 8.5 and 9.5 hours of sleep per night. The vast majority are getting 6 to 6.5 hours. Over 70% of teenagers are chronically sleep deprived. We also know people say, well, if they get to just get up later, they'll just stay up later. They don't. This has been studied. Teenagers do get extra sleep when school start times are pushed back. We know that early morning sleep hours is where we experience REM sleep, which is most important to consolidate memory and emotion regulation. So I can go on and on with these benefits, but what we know is that North Idaho has a horrific suicide rate for teenagers. Horrific. My best friend's son is 16 years old at Lakeland High School. He has had 7 peers commit suicide in the last 3 years. 7 children he went to school with are dead. These are not attempts, these are not cries for help. They are gone forever. We are losing lives, and one factor is exhaustion. I know it's only one piece, but it's something we can change. We can do this. So there are challenges. It will affect bus routes. There could be costs, but many school districts have done this with a cost-neutral model. They also will face backlash from community. People are scared of change, but we can educate the public on why this change needs to happen, and I believe many parents would back this. Many parents would understand that their child is suffering because of their exhaustion. So there's lots of things we can do. I'll cut myself
Dr.
off in my
Morrow.
3 minutes. I just want to point out, I have a handout to give each of the board members. On the back, I have some resources. I'm the first resource, and I have my contact information, and I am willing to volunteer my time to be part of a transition committee and to be part of parent education in our community. There is also an agency called Start School Later. It's a nonprofit made up of people from medical fields, education fields, the legal field, and they have a $99 toolkit called Changing Bell Times to Meet Student Needs, a toolkit for superintendents and school system leaders. I would be happy to buy this toolkit for $99 for whoever would like this. I will volunteer to buy this for the school district, and I will volunteer my time. And so I'm going to keep coming back, and I'm going to present you with new data each time and a new plea for action. I don't want to keep spinning my wheels. I want to get the public talking and making change on this. It's essential. We know we're causing harm, and we need to do it differently. We need to serve the needs of our children in this town better. So thank you for putting up with me.
Yes, thank you. Not here.
In what regard? As far as whether or not it's a viable conversation, it's absolutely a viable conversation. It's one that you want to engage the entire community in and make sure that you understand the needs and wants of the community. I think the lowest hanging fruit on this is that there's plenty of data that supports the idea of later start time for adolescents and teenagers. The trade-offs are where the questions become whether or not the community values the decision. And I think the first thing to acknowledge would be whether or not we want. There's two ways to do it. Number one is you flip start times so that your younger students are going to school earlier. And also getting out of school earlier, or you spend a significant more amount of money on transportation for the district so that you can essentially run one start time with later start for everybody. And both of them, either you're spending a lot more money or you've got theoretically 5 and 6 year olds at bus stops very early in the day and also coming home very early in the day. And so to respond to those things appropriately, you've got to have supports in place and ready ways to manage that. Because a 6-year-old out of school at 2:30, 2:45 in the day means that there are going to be daycare issues in places that they're going to need to be supervised. So there's this conversation is happening all over the country, and some school districts have chosen to switch, and some have chosen not to. It's if we have a 4 o'clock dismissal, for example, at high school, that means practices start at 4:15, and so they run later. And so it's a very easy conversation to have. It's not a hard one, but it is a very it brings up some very important points to people on both sides of this discussion. If the board is so inclined, we're glad to take this on as an investigation with a list of kind of pros and cons as a starting point, and I would strongly recommend that you commit no less than 9 months to this conversation once we've decided that we're interested in having that conversation.
So we're not noticed for this conversation. So thank you for some ideas on that. What I would suggest is if this is a conversation we want to have going forward, that we just get on agenda here in the short term, over the next couple of months. So we'll meet on Fridays, kind of our follow-up to this meeting. Lisa now gets to do that, and myself. Lisa is vice chair. So we'll meet with Superintendent Cook and Lynn, and we'll just look as we schedule out our future meetings, and we'll have some discussion about whether we want to get this on the agenda. And that would be probably just a kickoff point, I'm guessing, based on what Dr. Cook said, for having the discussion. So, okay, thank you. Okay. So we'll work to get that done. All right, next up is our consent agenda. I'm just going to point out with Ms. Ebner off currently, we've moved the finance report into the consent agenda because she's not with us this month to report. And we just may work on some tweaks going forward a little bit around that and just kind of play with that. One model that Dr. Cook's looked at and we've discussed in those Friday meetings is that the finance report would be more in-depth, but on something more specific per month. So 1 month we might look at revenues, or 1 month we might look at budget, certain budget items or that sort of thing. So something that's maybe a little more in-depth, as opposed to kind of a real glossy overview of the entire budget each month. So I think when Ms. Ebner comes back, we're going to try that for a month and just see how it goes and what our feedback is and what we think of that, and then we'll adjust from there. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through I?
So
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on any of those? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries, Ms. Town. We are into our information items, and the first up is a facilities update presentation. Dr. Cook, are you starting here?
Yeah. So it's the time of the year where we'd like to kind of give you the current state. We have several construction projects that are essentially completed, and kind of current state of facilities. And we're going to take a first run at a pretty comprehensive first shot at deferred maintenance kind of estimations. We'll present that to you, and then also kind of what we're looking forward with regards to the next 2 construction projects that we have kind of pending out there. Constructions at Lakes Middle School and an elementary school at a location to be determined later, but to talk kind of about how that looks and how all of these are intertwined and how those aspects are all related. So I'm going to turn this over to Director of Operations Jeff Voller to give you guys kind of the overview of all these projects.
Good evening, Chairman Morris Rowe, esteemed trustees, Superintendent Cook. Thank you for having me here tonight. So like Dr. Cook shared, just to give you kind of a brief overview, I'm going to start with Lakes Middle School and just give you an update on that we are close to going to bid on that project right now. I've got a meeting this week with the engineers to look at final details on that, and major construction plans are done and basically ready to go. So we anticipate those will be out for public bid towards the end of next week. So we'll have more to report on that as we get bids back. Those will be out for approximately 4 weeks. And I think our goal is to bring that to you by for the first meeting in March, that we'll have the final numbers for that.
Jeff, can you just explain how those bids are going to look? Because it'll be different, right? It's not. It's not total project cost. So
under
we're
the
looking at pieces.
Under the CMGC model, the bids will go to the contractor. So the public opening will be opening bids publicly from the HVAC contractor, the plumbing contractor, the electrical contractor, rather than opening a bid from a general contractor that is like a one lump sum price. And so with the public opening will be the individual bids that will be publicly opened, and then the general contractor we'll all sit down and look at those and put together kind of the final pricing for the package on that, make sure they meet the specs. And so there'll be some work on the after side once we receive those bids, just to make sure all the details are there and everything's been included in it. So it is a little different under that CMGC model, correct? So I'm going to start today by just going through the projects that we've done. The high school projects, as you know, are substantially complete. We were able to knock out quite a few of the details over the winter break when students weren't there. There were a few aspects of the classrooms that needed some final details, and we needed students not to be in the buildings to accomplish those. And we were able to get all those knocked out over the period. So I'm going to take us way back to Fernand STEM Academy. They received their parking lot. It was redesigned, and they received new paving in that, and that's functioning very well for them. That one had a budget of $340,000, and after that project is complete, there is still a remaining contingency available of $7,265. Hayden Meadows received a new gym floor. The budget for that was $95,000, and the contingency after that project is $21,901 still remaining available. Dalton Elementary had received a new parking lot, 3 new classrooms, a music room and a stage, an art room. They relocated and redesigned their library and tech lab, and classroom updates on all of the existing classrooms, including carpets, desks, storage, and media. The budget on that project was $3,146,000, and the contingency available at the end of that project now is $154,240. I think it's important to look as we get into some of these larger projects as just so you guys have an understanding of what going into the project, a lot of these projects came in over budget, and then a lot of these had alternates that were also bid at that time. And I'm going to walk you through some of those just so you have an understanding of kind of where we went on these projects. So on Dalton, we have a list of 8 alternates that were accepted when we opened the bids. The first one was replacing the existing rooftop HVAC on the south wing of the building, as well then as alternate number 2 on the second wing. Due to budget, neither of those were accepted. The TPO new roofing on that building, again at $80,000, was not accepted. Stain and existing, the soffit on the south wing, was bid as an alternate. It was not initially accepted, but we found some outside vendors that were able to do it for less, and so we were able to complete that outside of the general contract, and it will get that portion of it done. The ball wall, which is for the students on the playground, was not accepted. But at this point, the PTA is looking to fund that, and there'll be more coming as they have their meetings now after the first of the year.
Mr. Voller, when you say not accepted, could you explain that? What does that mean? You
Yeah,
didn't
so
have the money for it, or didn't like the bid, or what was
so
the
yeah, sure, certainly. When the bids come in, we have a lump sum that comes in from the general contractor, and then all of these are line items that are just listed as alternates. So you have your GC to complete the scope of the project, and then should the school district decide, we could accept any or all or none of these alternates. So these are all just basically a line item price to do that one portion of the project should we decide we want to do it. And some of those are, if projects come in under budget, sure be nice to do some of these. On most of these projects, unfortunately, they came in over budget, and so many of these alternates we were not able to accept and had to look at some alternatives for accomplishing them, or some of them are still sitting out there as things we need to consider for the future. And some of these will get into deferred maintenance too. You'll see these come up again as I get into my deferred maintenance, which I'll talk about here in a little bit.
Okay, well, thank you for clarification. I wasn't quite clear what you meant by not accepted.
Sure.
Some of them it was a budget issue, some was, I mean, you did the things you said you were going to do, and these were extras, basically, right?
Yeah, those were things that we would like to do should the money be available or should they come in under budget.
But I think we should clarify they weren't extras. A lot of these are needs that the school will need eventually to be done. So they're not like wish list of parents saying, oh, we want this. These are needs of the school, but they did not fit within the budget for existence, the rooftop HVAC system. That's a need that still exists and will have to be taken care of.
It is, and those now are on the deferred maintenance list, and we'll talk about some of those here in a few minutes.
But there are extras beyond the budget, right? Of $3,145,000 budget, right?
Correct. Yeah. So that was the total budget. You know, a portion of that wasn't the total general contract budget. That was the budget for the entire scope of the project. And so we had, a large portion of that was the general contract, and then we have engineering fees that the district pays for, and we have soft costs that we pay for. There were maybe some portions that we knew that we were going to cover through the school district, and so those would have been line item differently in the budget.
I also just want to clarify, especially for our long-range planning members out there, that many of these not accepted alternates were recommendations from the long-range planning of needs that had been identified. So I think we should clarify that also, that these are not extras. These were identified needs by long-range planning, and many of these have been kicking around since 2012.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct.
And these were, it's been a long time since we were in that process, but we'll be there again, hopefully, with the elementary school. But
yes.
These bids, these weren't just made in a vacuum, or these decisions, these were board decisions whether to accept these alternates or not. If we'd been in a different situation and the GC bid came in $1 million under budget, we would have been taking some or all of these options.
Yes.
These are just additional items that we're hoping to get done within the budget if possible.
Correct. Okay. Yes. So, and then going back to this review, alternate number 6, grind and polish the new floors in lieu of VCT. So VCT is the tile that you see on the floors of many of our hallways and classrooms. That's a pretty cheap tile to put down, but it has some maintenance issues, and I'll discuss that a little bit too as we get a little bit further along in this presentation. You'll see grind and polish versus VCT come up in a few different places. So, and when I say grind and polish, what we mean by that is taking up the VCT, or in some of the new additions, you just have a concrete slab that's ground down to be very, very smooth, and then it's got a real polished look on it. You can see that now at the entryway at CHS when you go in there. Lake City High School has that in some of the new hallways, and it's something I think we should consider on new projects coming up, but also give consideration to maybe changing over some of the existing flooring that we have in some of our buildings, and I'll talk about that here in greater depth here in a little bit as well. So again, that one was not accepted, and Dalton had a alternate 8 for basketball backboards in the gym. Again, also not accepted. Moving on to Coeur d'Alene High School, just to review what we did there, we added 8 new classrooms, a new student entry, expanded the gym, added a wrestling room, and a new weight room. The budget on that project was approximately $7.5 million, and with substantial completion now and nearly all of the bills in, we estimate that contingency available to be about $550,000 at the end of that project. Again, going through the alternates just so you have an understanding of what we looked at on that one. Install a new TPO roof per plan. That one was accepted. So there were 2 options. Option 2 was to install a new TPO roof at just the 700 wing, and we opted to accept the larger portion of that TPO roof replacement for that one. Alternate 3 was to provide skylights in the new classrooms. That was accepted and completed. Alternate 4 was for a sound system PA in the gym. Again, initially that one was not accepted, but we found an outside vendor that was able to do that for about half the cost, and we were able to get that completed outside of the general contract. Alternate 5 was to replace the entire gym floor. So what that meant was to pull up the existing floor that was down there, but the base bid said, let's leave the existing floor and add on to it in the part of the addition, and that's what we opted for that one. Alternate 6 was to replace the existing VCT in the corridors with the polished concrete. Again, not accepted. Alternate 7, extend the weight room addition as shown on the plans. That was accepted. Sound panels in the gym was not taken at that time. And the classroom audiovisual systems, again, was not accepted at the time, but what we found is it's become much cheaper for us to do some of those through our tech department. And so if they purchase the equipment and we have some of our technicians install some of that, we're able to accomplish that for a much less price. And so that's something that we're going to look at, again, moving forward with the elementary school and the Lakes project. And we've already taken those out of the base bid, and just know that that's going to be in the budget for our tech department to provide that AC, the audio video equipment, and do the final install. The rough in for the cabling and all that stuff will happen through the general contract and the electrical contractors on the job. We will just provide the equipment and do the final connections of it. And then Coeur d'Alene High School initially came in quite a bit over budget. So the one item, so what we do in that case is we look at value engineering. Are there other things that we can take as almost like an alternate, but like as a standalone project that we can eliminate or change something to reduce, to bring down the cost? And in this case, the HVAC system replacement was $1.5 million, and we ended up eliminating that at this point to reduce the cost and bring it down to within budget. And I provided you some current estimate dollars of what it would be if we were going to go back and do that. And that was just the 700 hall that we were looking at the HVAC system for, and I gave you some costs of a couple of other halls and the systems that need to be considered as well. And again, these will come back up here a little bit later as we look at deferred maintenance. Okay, moving on to Lake City High School, we added 10 classrooms, added a second gym, added a wrestling room, and a weight room. The budget on that project was approximately $6.6 million, and the estimated contingency at the end of this project is just a little bit over $400,000 on that one. We don't have quite as many alternates on the Lake City project. We did look at some polished concrete. We looked at carpeting. We looked at flushometers to track the amount of water that we're using. and some drinking fountain options to change to the bottle style fillers. And none of those were accepted as well. And again, we did have to look at some value engineering options because that one did come in over budget at the initial bid. The first thing we looked at was the repaving of the bus loop and a modification to the parent drop-off area. And that saved us, in taking that out at the time of the project, was $241,000. We were able to partially complete a portion of that parent drop-off area. We didn't go through the extent of all the curbing changes and the landscape changes that the plan called out for, but we were able to put some barriers in and make a change to that drop-off area that is functional. It just doesn't have some of the desired style and kind of final appeal that we were hoping for initially with that, the way that it was designed. And then we looked at deleting the replacement of the bleacher drive wheels. We took out 76 lockers and deleted the creation of the multi-purpose classroom, which was a classroom that was, it's up above the gym where the existing weight room is. With the weight room moving, there was looking at finishing that off to be a classroom or multi-purpose room for staff meetings, for testing. So there's still a need for Lake City to consider something like that possibly in the future. And that space still exists. We just didn't, and I think at this point, my understanding is that Cheer is going to use that space for right now, and we can look at some long-term strategies for the use of that space as well. So with the total value engineering of Lake City High School, we cut $308,000 out of that project to bring it within budget.
You know, if every kid has a locker now, I mean, does that eliminate, I mean, some kids don't have lockers.
I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know at the beginning of the year we asked some locker questions, and I didn't get feedback from them that they were short. So I know CHS said they were, and I didn't get feedback that Lake City was.
Share lockers is what they do?
I don't know if they do, but I don't feel like a lot of kids use lockers. I could be wrong. I'm just going by my own kids.
Not anymore, huh?
Yeah. I think maybe their freshman year, they're like, I need to get a locker, and then they decide I don't really have that much time to go back and forth, and so mine would just A-day stuff in a backpack, B-day stuff, so.
And I can find that out. I have a meeting with Principal Clifford later this week. I can bring that up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So bringing those contingency numbers into a summary, these are the numbers that we just went through. Right now we have a total contingency remaining available of just a little over $1.1 million. So now we're going to look at deferred maintenance. And this was in your board packet, so if it's a little hard to read on the screen, you should have that in your board packet as well. So many of those items that we took out either as alternates or value engineering are now going to show back up here on the HVAC summary. So the biggest item is going to be HVAC. We have some aging systems across the district. Coeur d'Alene High School, you'll see the 700 hall. The current price is about $1 million on that one. The 100 hall, the 200 to 300 hall. So if we were to redo all of the HVAC system at CHS right now, we'd be looking at about 1.4, plus then we'd need to add the soft costs of 20% in on that. Dalton, again, will need some HVAC work. Those would be the top two. That's 1A and 2A. And I'd recommend that we look at roofs when we look at HVAC systems because they're rooftop mounted units, and so while we're doing that work, they should probably be done congruently. And so you guys can look at the numbers on that as we go through there. But basically the bottom line is if we were to do all the HVAC systems today that are identified as needs within the district, we'd be looking at about $5.2 million to take care of all of those needs. And we had a mechanical engineer provide us some pretty good numbers on that. So I mean, he went through and did his assessment on that and gave us current numbers on that. So these numbers are pretty current based on a to-date engineer looking at it.
Mr. Voller, if I can just interrupt for a second. This is a new sheet for us that we haven't seen, at least in my tenure on the board. And if you recall, a few months ago, as we were working on our goals in our direction for Dr. Cook, this was one item that fell under facility plans that we added in there that we wanted to create and then we were in agreement on this, but create a deferred maintenance schedule. And I think as it moves forward, it'll be kind of a timeline for tackling these. I think historically this has been done mainly through Brian Martin's brain, right? He's got a great knowledge of our buildings and the age of the facilities, and he's put these projects into a schedule. But I think we've realized as we've acquired more buildings and continue to expand, and the list is what it is, that we need to create a plan for tackling these issues that we'll continue to see. Once we solve these ones, there's just going to be new things that come along, right? Because these are buildings and they age, just like your home. Major appliances need to be repaired and replaced, and roofs and all those sorts of things. So I think this is kind of first blush, right? This is we're looking at this now, and we'll see it eventually move into a schedule.
Yeah, and that's a good dovetail into something that I wanted to bring up as well, is that there are programs out there to help with this. This is a spreadsheet that's been created within the district. This is our research. This is Brian Martin's expertise that's putting this together. This is our maintenance crews do a great job of going out and maintaining the equipment to give us the longevity of it. But if you were to ask me right now, how old is the HVA system on the 700 hall SCHS, I couldn't answer that. There's probably somebody in the district I could find that answer. But there's programs out there that can bring all this data into one place. And we've been looking at those, and we have one that we're getting ready to bring forward to you guys. In fact, I believe it'll be on your consent agenda for the next board meeting. That we'd like to look at moving forward to, where we can go out and go into the buildings, do an assessment on them. And so we're going to go into Lake City, and they have 104 heat pumps in Lake City. And so we can tell you the date that, exactly what heat pump that is, when it was installed, what maintenance has been done on it. Of those 104, they've actually done pretty well. Not many of them gone out, but I think we've replaced, like, say, 6 motors in those heat pumps. I could tell you which ones then we've replaced motors on. And this is going to be built on data that has been collected by a company that does this professionally all across the U.S. And so we're going to give them a school, say the size of Canfield, and they're going to take that school and they're going to find a like school somewhere in the U.S. And they're going to say, okay, we're going to build it off of this template. And then we're going to put in the data. And then that's going to allow us to say the water heaters at Canfield are 25 years old, and the typical lifespan of a water heater is 18. And so we better keep that on the radar, that that's something that we might want to think about replacing and put that on our deferred maintenance list. And so rather than us kind of watching it and saying, oh, I think that one's kind of giving us some trouble, we've been replacing that or repairing that one, 4 times in the last 3 years. This will give us a further look ahead. It'll also help give us some strategies for how to handle that deferred maintenance. It'll give us some, at the touch of a button, I can pull up any school and tell you, the age and the status of equipment. And so we're going to bring that before you guys, and we'll hope you give consideration to looking at that program that we can start implementing now over the next couple months and take this to a deeper level. And be able to provide even more, I think, significant data through graphs. We can look at that data on a number of different ways through the way this program is built. I've met with NIC. They're currently using it right now to take a look at it and see how that works, and they're extremely happy with it for the way that system is working for them as well. So I think we'd like to go that direction.
So can I ask you, Mr. Volder, you have or you will be acquiring information about, for instance, how old roofs are in the various schools, right? Because
yeah.
I remember about 4 or 5 years ago there was a leak in Sorensen roof. Mm-hmm. We had to come up with the money to fix that.
Right.
I think it might have come out of the bond,
right.
Possibly. But I just wondered, I assume as some of these roofs are aging out.
Right. Yeah. So we'd be able to look at that in that program, because we would have done an assessment on every school, and I'd be able to tell you Sorensen's roof is, I'm making the number up right now, it's 12 years old, right? But Fernand's roof is 18 years old, and so we know that maybe we need to prioritize Fernand's over, but we might have leaking issues, and so we can track those as well too. So, but yeah, it'll give us the data on the typical lifespan of a roof and the status of our buildings and our equipment, because we will go do a hands-on, on-the-ground evaluation of every building, basically going item by item, equipment by equipment, as we go through this data in this program that we'd be looking at.
Currently, when these items are coming up and we're taking care of them, or I know a few years ago there was one of the buildings at CHS we replaced within the budget. Those are coming out of the maintenance and facilities budget. They have some line item in there for tackling these issues.
Yeah, I mean, currently our strategy is to fix things as they break. You know, we looked at some of these under the bonds, but unfortunately, due to costs and of construction, that a lot of these were cut, so they're still maintaining on the deferred maintenance list. So I think we're going to need to have some hard conversations moving forward about, you know, what are the priorities, what do we want to do with these different things as it comes to budgeting. You know, there's certain things on here that I think we can cover under a maintenance budget, but there's some things on here that are going to be far beyond what we have in our maintenance budget.
If I could, I'd just like to add, this isn't necessarily a bill of things that need to be fixed right now. Deferred maintenance is thought of as driving a car with 160,000 miles on it. You want to be realistic in the fact that parts of the car could break down, and that you need to have a mindset that I may have to pay a little bit to drive it at this length. But this isn't the same thing as saying we need a total of $8 million right now to fix all these needs. It's a forward-looking process to be 3 to 5 years ahead of time and know and understand that there's going to be budgetary impact on these systems that are aging out across the district. And the better data we have on tracking their useful lifespan, the more likely we can accurately predict the cost to the district to maintain those at a level that's highly functional for the school system. And I think we shared this with long-range planning, this data on this guesstimate. And I shouldn't say it's a guesstimate, but it's definitely an educated best shot at this without some sort of supplemental resource to give us more accuracy. But the idea is to really dial in about as tightly as you can to start to predict what those annual costs will be to maintain your facilities and keep the investment of the community up to the highest standards we can.
Mr. Voller, I want to thank you. I think this deferred maintenance spreadsheet is fantastic, and it's a long time coming, so thank you. It's a great start. Yep. I think the one thing when I read through this and I read the information is I had heartburn and spent a little time going through my file cabinet, even though some people here don't use file cabinets. And I scrolled back to 2012 and long-range planning, and I came across the 2012 bond levy recommendation. Scrolled down there and looked at CHS. Oh, wow, what do you know? HVAC, $520,000. Didn't get done. Found the 2017 bond request. HVAC, darn it, and we're not going to do it again. And I just can't sit up here in my mind say that that's okay, because we make promises to the community. And a couple of these items, I feel as though we have made some promises. And I know there's some student learning environments at CHS in particular where HVAC is impacting student learning. And I wish we had Mr. Heller here to talk to us about what it's like to go to class in the 700 wing of CHS, because if it was listed in 2012 as a need and we went to the community and we went to the taxpayers and we said we need this bond to pass because we have to update our HVAC, and now we're calling it deferred maintenance, it's not deferred maintenance, it's a need that we've identified in 2012. And so there's some things up here that we're going to have to prioritize, in my opinion, until we give away contingency money. And it's difficult that this elementary school is costing more money, but there are a few items on here which I think deserve attention. And if you have a plan on how we can fix the HVAC in the 700 series, I was there with Chair Morrisroe and we opened up those bids, and it was a tough day to know that we were going to call it value engineering and take out that HVAC piece of that bid. But it's something that I don't think, unless we have a plan to pay for it, and it doesn't require going to the taxpayers again, it's something that we can just let it go.
Yeah, I think that's something we're going to have to sit down and put some strategies together on how can we handle those things and take a look at that. And I'd like to, the program I'm referring to is called Amoresco, and I'd like to get some of that Amoresco data so we can really look big picture at this and figure out how can we strategize through this. A number of years ago, the lotto money was all allocated towards deferred maintenance, and we were keeping up. We were using that money on a regular basis to do the deferred maintenance. That money now is going into the general fund, and so really, like I said, our deferred maintenance is being taken care of by basically things that are, when they break or need replacing, we'll fix them and get them taken care of. And our maintenance staff is doing a great job at preventative maintenance and doing their systems.
I think many of these items are those things that you're discussing, and we can set up a long-term plan to fix them. But some of these items we have identified in prior past bonds, and the community has been made aware of these issues. And so there are parents, just like I do, who keep papers and who will think, oh my gosh, I received this levy information in the mail or bond information. I thought we fixed the HVAC in 2012 at CHS. And so we have a commitment to fix some of these things, and I think we need to have an honest conversation of which items have we been kicking down the can. And there's a couple on here that I think need some attention.
Yep. Yeah, so HVAC is definitely a big item. Roofs is kind of the next biggest item as you look on here. Again, some of those were looked at under bonds, but are still remaining on this list. Carpet is I think the third biggest one, and Carpet is one that some of those are smaller projects that we can piece together over time, but you know, there's certainly a pretty big portion of that needs some things to be addressed there. You know, Woodland, for example, if you walk into Woodland, that entire school is carpet. Hallways, rooms, offices, everything in that entire school is carpet, and it's getting to be in pretty bad shape. So we're going to need to do something to address the carpet there as well, or the flooring situation. And again, that's where maybe we look at either VCT or like an alternate grind and polish on that as well. So again, as you look through this, you can kind of look through what these items are. You break it down into totals. You're looking at just shy of $8 million. If you break that down over, you know, if we were going to tackle this in 3 years, we'd be looking at $2.6 million. And if we're going to tackle this over 5 years, we're looking at about $1.5 million a year.
What is your budget for deferred maintenance right now, currently?
Don't have one.
No.
Okay. Any other questions on that portion of it? Okay. This portion of it is kind of some alternate items that we could give some consideration to. Orbio cleaning system is what you call an empowered water system. If you've ever heard the Zero Res commercials that you hear locally on radios, I hear it all the time on my drive home, but it's talking about this empowered water that is for cleaning carpets, and it's basically taking water and it's running through this system and it's putting some salt in it and it's charging it electrically to get the ions moving around, and I can't explain it, and hopefully none of the chemistry teachers are listening to my presentation here right now, but the crazy thing is it works, and really it's just water, but it creates a safe an efficient cleaning solution. And we have one of those in place at Woodland right now that we put in a little over a year ago, and we've been testing it, and it's great. It's a nice compact system. The water runs through it. It's got a little salt filter to it, and it just basically charges it, and it spits out this solution that is ready for cleaning. And you go into any janitor closet at any one of our buildings, and there's just chemicals sitting everywhere. And you go into Woodland, and there's this one little unit, and there's about 4 bottles of spray, and there's this little bucket of the solution that's ready for cleaning. So it's safe, it's environmentally friendly, it's non-toxic. They're saying it's really the way of the future, and so we'd like to give consideration to bringing that on board for many of the other schools. So you can see the cost breakdown to bring that on at each of the schools that don't have that system in place. And then with VCT tile, we've talked a little bit about that. So that'd be removing the VCT tile and going to a grind and polish in the hallways at many of those locations. You know, again, like I said, the VCT tile is cheap to put down, but it's actually pretty costly, and it's really high maintenance to maintain. The janitors every night are cleaning those floors. During the winter, they have to do, or during the summer, they do a major strip and refinish of those, a new waxing of it. Most janitors spend about a month solid on addressing those floors in every building. With the grind and polish floors, they're very low maintenance. A little bit more cost up front, but the maintenance on it, again, is just very, very low on them. So the pricing you see in here would be to go to grind and polish on the hallways at basically all the school locations, kind of broke down by school. So the one highlighted in red is Woodland, and something we may strongly want to consider replacing the carpet at Woodland and looking at this VCT. I would note that if you ever go to Winton, take a look at the floors there. Those are all a stained, polished floor that look really nice. Look at the new entry at CHS, and you know that's what you're looking at. And it's a lot of, you'll see a lot of places going to that. If you go to the Fred Meyer or go to the new Super One that was just remodeled, and just stop and look at the floors there. That's what we're talking about with that. So you'll see, like the new Super One, they pulled all that tile up and they did a grind and polish on those floors. So that's what we're referring to when we talk about these. Okay, so let's talk about the new elementary school a little bit. I gave you guys a concept of the layout for the new school. Our target is 52,000 square feet is where we'd like to be with that. We've met a couple times with the architects, and we're looking at about 52.8 right now. Part of that was we got it down, but there was talk of, you know, how many kindergarten classrooms do we need? And we need an art room here that we haven't asked them to put back in as well. So in this concept, we do have 4 spaces for kindergarten. And what I should say with that is we have 3 dedicated spaces to kindergarten, and then we have 1 space that's shown as could be a 4th kindergarten or a maker space, kind of depending on the needs of the school and where we would want to go with that. So that's what's shown here. It would be a similar design kind of at either location, whether we build at Prairie or we build at the current Nexus site. This would be a really similar concept, similar size. We'd probably restack blocks a little bit just based on exact site configuration, but we're right in that range of where we would be, and once we decide where we're going to be moving forward with the location. So looking at a little more detail on the cost of the new elementary school, when we first budgeted for this school, remember it was about 3 years ago that we started looking at this, and the current construction costs, the architects will give us, based on current construction costs on schools that are being built in our region, those were about $175 a square foot to $180 a square foot. And unfortunately today, those costs have gone up to about $200 a square foot. So if you look at that model that I just showed you at $52,847 at $200 a square foot, the estimated cost for the general contract portion of that would be $10.5 million. Our budget right now shows about 9.4 is what we have budgeted for that. So there's definitely a shortage there that we're gonna have to figure out how to come up with some different things. But I also remind you that we did have some savings now in the contingency from the other buildings as well. And then I gave you a price that is currently sitting in the budget on what we have for security, furniture, equipment, technology. Like I mentioned, technology, we would do a lot of the finishing of that portion in-house. And then on the bottom side of that, the architect, engineering, soft costs would be all the portions that the school district pays. And then let's take a look at the timeline. And I'm actually going to start you down at the very bottom right of this timeline. So the school opening in September of 2020, that's our goal. To get there, we're going to need about 2 weeks to move into the building. So I'm moving from bottom up now on this a little bit. I'm going to take you backwards through this. The school district needs a couple weeks to get teachers in, to get everything set up, because this is a brand new building. So it's not like we've just shifted things around to do a remodel. This is a brand new building. We need time to move everything in and get it set up ready for school. So it's going to be about a 13-month construction process is the estimate from the architects, and I'm talking to a few general contractors in the area, which means we need to be breaking ground by the middle of July on this. And so continue to move backwards. If we're awarding bids and getting ready to mobilize in the middle of June for a middle of July start, that takes us into the middle of May for bids and permitting. The architects and engineers need about 3.5 months to do plans and get all the engineering done and get all the drawings detailed and ready to go to get out for bids and permits. And that basically backs us up to this month of January, where we're going to be doing final planning and ultimately looking at, hopefully we can select a site, and we've got that on the agenda for the next board meeting for discussion on that, and I'll be presenting a lot more detail about the 2 elementary school locations at that meeting. So with that, that's my presentation. I look forward to meeting with you guys next week again and looking at the elementary schools and talking about some details between the 2 different site options, and unless there's any other questions.
I just have a question about saving money. I do know that Fernan and Skyway and some of those schools have similar designs, so that you can save architecture fees to use the same design. So what you're saying basically is if we choose, let's just say Prairie, we could probably use the same design for Hayden if we chose that as the second school and save ourselves some architecture fees, right?
This design would be fairly similar. Yeah, I would think we could probably, if that's certainly a concept, we could look at it either between those 2 locations. And this is a 2-story stacked, fairly compact design, based on the size of those lots available for us.
Okay, just thinking of ways of saving money.
Sure.
Right.
Okay. And I think in the past, I asked about that once before, and I think with Fernan, Hayden Meadows, and Skyway are all similar, and I think it wasn't huge savings. It's not like you just paid once. You still pay 3 times.
You still do.
Architect still gets paid, the engineer.
There's still details on a lot of different designs.
There's time savings there, and it was 10 or 20%, something like that.
Yep. And for reference, all of those schools are about that 50 to 55,000 square foot size. This one is just a stacked 2-story building.
Do you think before we decide about these contingency dollars that we could just hear from you, your opinion, or get an expert on, what kind of condition are these HVAC systems in? I know I've talked to some administrators there and some students and my own student, and it can be difficult at times that they're not functioning. Can we just have an honest update that what is the life expectancy? If we had to replace them in a year or 2 years, what would it look like for our budget? If we choose to take these dollars elsewhere, just so we have a real honest conversation about when and how are we going to update these systems?
Okay, sure. I mean, there's certainly a need there. I mean, you've addressed that, and Sean, as we've obviously looked at it several different times, and I can call that engineer that did these systems and say, okay, tell me what's your honest opinion, your professional opinion. How long do you think we have on these systems? And talk to our HVAC guys who maintain them. And like I said, they do a very good job of going out and doing the preventive maintenance on them and working on them. But there's a lifespan on all of these, as we know, and your home has them, my home has them, and our schools have them. So,
Mr. Voller, there was one. It was the last line, I think, in your memo. That wasn't up on the board today, but it was in the packet, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying there. But I think it's that our recommendation would be that available contingencies from the completed projects be used towards the new elementary school to help cover the costs that you just illustrated. We budgeted for $170, $180 a foot, and we're anticipating that to be closer to 200,
yeah.
Which put us around $1 million shortfall, which is about what we have in contingency.
Correct.
So would the recommendation be that we don't do anything, that we don't make those decisions until we know exactly where Lakes is going to come in, and maybe until this July 15th opening of bids or whatever it is, that we know, okay, maybe it comes down a little between now and then, or
yeah, I mean,
who
when
knows?
we open bids and we know the price, then we can be a little more comfortable with the GC portion of that will be, and we're certainly going to hold some contingency available for both those projects as well, because we don't know what's going to happen, and we may dig on one of these properties and there's a septic tank that's sitting there that was like, oh, surprise, hey, we get to deal with that now. So you don't ever know until you're towards the end of the projects.
And I'd just like to add, we've got Lakes Middle School. One of the things that we're finding ourselves in is this mode of trying to complete our promises that we've made, and trying to make sure that those things that have been promised to the community are being delivered, and we're working on each and every one of those. So your comments about the HVAC system is not lost upon us. We're all very much aware of that as well. I think our goal is to try to meet every need, but to do so means we have to sit tight for a little while and try to do things as tightly to the budget as we can. And I think we're very hopeful that in the next 6 months we can answer every one of those situations in a positive fashion. But in the meantime, it would be our recommendation not to spend money without consideration of all those promises that we've made. It would be nice to be able to get Lakes Middle School completed on time, under budget, get the elementary school built at whatever site we choose, on time, on budget, and also get some of those high ticketed items on the deferred maintenance list taken care of as well. And to do that, we're going to have to do things as well as possible. We're going to have to monitor costs very well. And so our recommendation would be to not make any decisions right now at this point, but keep an eye towards how we can do the best job we can, keeping costs down, and then revisit this conversation here shortly. We have a tentative meeting scheduled for next Monday in which we hope to be able to give you guidance on where we can locate the elementary schools based upon conversations that we're having with Lakes Highway District. Those conversations are ongoing. They're not completed yet, but I can tell you that so far negotiations are working towards a potential resolution, and we hope to have more information for you by that Monday meeting next week.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Voller?
Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to thank Mr. Fuller and Dr. Cook for undertaking this and coming with some recommendations and by recommendations, I'm talking about what you're going to have next month, I guess, with the additional group there, as far as more, a deeper dive and an outside perspective of some of our facilities and our equipment. So thank you both. Okay, we are into action items, and the first action item up is really based on a discussion that we've had over the last several months, which is just our maintenance and operations levy. And the last month's kind of blurring to me, but I think we had a special meeting, or did we do that in a board meeting?
It was a special meeting.
Yeah, we did it in a special meeting where we came to an agreement on what we were going to ask for and the wording and so forth that was going to be used. So this is, as promised at that meeting, this is the actual resolution and the legalese that had to be drafted. So this was in our board book, agenda item B, and there's a motion for consideration there. Someone wants to tackle that.
I'll tackle it. I move to approve resolution 18-19-003 as presented. Do I need to read the whole thing or not? I
No,
don't need
you
to read
do
all
not
that.
have to read it.
Good. Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion about the resolution? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries, Ms. Town. Item C here is novel recommendations that we saw last month. Is that
So
right?
at this time, yeah, at
Yep.
this time, I'd like to ask Dr. Nelson to come up and entertain any questions you guys might have regarding this month's recommendation for the novel Speak.
Okay, trustees, any questions for Dr. Nelson regarding the
Speaker forever.
the novel recommendation for this month? And again, we saw this last month. It was out for public comment, and no comments were received.
3 checkouts total. We did receive some verbal comment, but nothing for your packet. I do have some of the feedback, but they were all district office employees who checked it out and had a good read over the break.
Okay, any questions for Dr. Nelson? Okay, is there a motion to approve? Oh, I skipped pages here.
We have a motion. I move to approve Speak for whole group instruction at grades 9 through 12.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Item D. Go ahead, Dr. Cook.
Yeah, so item D is, I think this was on your agenda earlier in the year, and we pulled it and brought it back to your attention. We've got members that we'd like to ask for your approval on for the ad hoc math committee. We would anticipate this committee serving throughout the rest of this integrated math review, and just look at that and serve at the board's will for potentially up to the next couple of years. And we'd like for your guys' approval on that.
I just had a question about the committee was large last time. Maybe Dr. Nelson can answer some questions about retainment of current members. Is there a reason?
I think these are additions.
No.
No. No.
Chair Morris, Rowe, Superintendent Cook, and members of the board, we did reach out to our members of our committee, and it was crickets. We reached out to several people along the way as well who served in multiple capacities, and they either had other commitments or just didn't want to continue. So we really did try. We had several messages, and they were unresolved.
In some of the feedback I received in talking with some people, it was a contentious issue, right? It was a lot of time. There was a lot of back and forth. I think it was a difficult task, and I think that's probably why we found some people not interested in doing it again. To be quite honest, I don't love having the discussion again either, because it's a big topic. So. But it's one we need to do, and we're going to have to move forward with whoever we can get to help us out on it.
I know the bylaws are clear about what the ratio needs to look like with community versus district, and I wondered if that's why we'd kind of culled it down to 2 and 3. I don't have the bylaws in front of me for the.
It's a minimum 25% community.
I would like to see an actual community member on this committee, personally, for me. I think it's going to be a contentious topic again, and both of these candidates that want to be on here look great, and I would approve them, but I would like to see a person, just a community member, and it could be a parent, it could be a grandma, it could be anybody, but I feel like we need someone that's neutral. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that's fair feedback. Excuse me. I would ask for the board's permission. I would ask for, first of all, your approval, and secondly, we would give a commitment to try to produce positive, enlightened committee work and an open invitation to those that might want to join us. I think that's, I think it's an opportunity to have a new and fresh approach on this, and we will commit to that, and we will maintain communication throughout this existence of this committee that we would welcome anybody that wants to be a part of it, and add people as they would be willing to participate.
I just wonder, since we've had difficulty recruiting people for this committee, if there might not be another option to get this course approved. You know, from my perspective, I need an unbiased opinion on this, and I'm not sure this committee, I will feel comfortable saying, I wholeheartedly, not because I don't trust anybody on this committee, not because I don't believe they don't know what they're talking about, because this was so contentious. Do you have any other ideas on how to get this type of course approved?
Well, right now we were doing this according to policy, which was finding enough community members to meet the minimum expectations, and right now we have those standards met. Now, whether or not that's going to be a positive, engaging conversation is yet to be seen, but I think this was difficult last year, and well, for really a couple of years now, I think, and so I think there might be some things that we'd have to overcome, but if the board wants to go a different direction with how we get to community input on this, we can look at other instances, but right now this was our guidance to find some community members to make this committee whole.
I just think there could be community members who would question the validity of the work produced by this committee, and that worries me, and I don't want to start this process with any option that is tainted.
I think, one thing we could do, potentially as we move forward, is just having that outside review like we had with the folks down in southern Idaho, and I can't think of their name, but they looked at our geometry this year, and I believe Algebra 2, which is coming up here shortly.
Correct.
They are
Idaho
reviewing that
Regional
currently,
Math
so
Center.
that may be a way to supplement the work here if
one of the
we find
members
we're needing more.
And one of the volunteers to this committee is actually a retired member from the Regional Math Center here locally. So she certainly can bridge some of that, but we are always open to external review.
Was Mr. Wallen the chair of the committee last time?
Chair Hunter, Sam
Chair
Hunter was.
And he was not willing to return either?
He was not. His son is getting ready to graduate, and I believe he has a trip planned.
And Mr. Hunter has served on lots of committees. Okay, any other questions for Dr. Cook or Dr. Nelson? Okay, is there a motion to approve the following members for the 2018-19 Ad Hoc Math Committee?
So moved.
Second.
Got it? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Nay. Thank you.
I'm voting no.
Okay, next up is a French 3 text that we also saw last month. It's been reviewed. Dr. Nelson, are you going here, or Dr. Cook?
Dr. Nelson is here to take any questions.
Parlez-vous français? We did, in the month of December, have an opportunity to bring 4 French experts together to take a look at the text. The reviews are in your packet. And as you can see, they believe concurrently with Mrs. Carr, who is the requester at Coeur d'Alene High School, that this would be an excellent replacement for the current text in both French 3 and 4.
And the current text was quite old, if I recall from last month.
It's around 8 years at this particular point, so it's not in the extremely old, but it is a difficult text for them to get around. It's not conversational, and if you're familiar with the goals that we have as a district in moving students towards French language and composition, the AP exam, it needs to be something very conversational in its origin. They praise this particular text for being very modern and having a lot of connection to great conversational activity.
I don't know how to say it.
Is there a
either.
motion to approve the text as presented?
BND.
You could
There
do
you
it that
go.
way.
B and D.
So
3.
moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, policies for action. Why don't we just take these one policy at a time, Dr. Cook, if we could?
Yeah. So let's start with the policy 3530, suicide prevention. We got a few comments from this. This is, if you recall, this particular kind of a policy can be a difficult tightrope to walk, because by law we have a duty to inform, a duty to warn if we think a student is intent on harming self or others. And so at the same time, how do we follow procedures on that is you have to be careful, because you don't want to create undue records of circumstances of which counselors are protected, I guess you would say, through the dialogues that they're having with students that they might be servicing. And so Nicole Pekarski's here. If you guys have any questions on the recommended changes that you noticed in the red line, we did receive several comments, and we tried to best integrate those over the last month. So if you have any questions on this one, we're ready to entertain those.
I had the question, just following up to what the comment was about, one of the comments here was that there's a duty to warn, but it doesn't say who's to be warned. Maybe that issue could be addressed. I used to be a mental health professional, had to live with the duty to warn issue, and worked it out. But I just wondered how the school district is going to handle it.
Chair Mersrow and fellow board members, we did discuss this as a committee. We also discussed in greater detail with district leadership and legal counsel. And our intent is to allow for a wide variety of circumstances and situations that we may encounter. In that initial duty to warn, identifying that teachers in school districts with knowledge have a duty to warn. In the policy, in the procedure, we talk about in item 3, intervention, staff report to the impact team when they believe a student may be at an elevated risk of suicide. The impact team members follow assessment and referral protocol. Parent guardian is notified. So a key piece of this is to allow for each student's circumstance to be addressed appropriately, but identifying who those members of the team are, and those are team members will not be new roles. These are folks who are already doing this work. So these are the assistant principals, the counselors, school nurse, SROs, maybe a school psych. But identifying those individuals and then training all of our district staff in this policy and procedure that these are the people you want to identify and connect that student with, and they will have further training in that referral protocol.
So the impact team will make a decision about if they refer outside the school?
Yes, the impact team will ask further questions. So it might be such that we've done the QPR training in multiple schools across the district. And so perhaps a staff member, a teacher is concerned about a student. They see some red flags and they ask the student if they're considering suicide. And so in that question and answer, the teacher would then know, because we've done training on this policy and procedure, that they can go to the school nurse, they can go to the school counselor, they can go to the assistant principal or the SRO, and the student would have follow-up. So our further directions on that referral protocol involve providing information on who those referral sources would be and the appropriate agencies or individuals to contact for students' needs. So we're looking at the Columbia Screener for triage points for school and working with community agencies on how to streamline that care for students.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering, I mean, as far as, I know when I used to deal with suicidal patients, I would have to inform law enforcement, right? Law enforcement would have to do a safety situation. And sometimes the patient may not like that, but that was the law. So I would call law enforcement, they come over and see if the person should be hospitalized or not. So I'm just kind of wondering, that's a private mental health professional, but I'm just wondering in terms of the school district, the decision to go outside the district, like to the hospital, to a law enforcement, would be made by the impact team. Is that what you're saying?
What we've got is the Columbia Screener provides a triage, and I was just talking with Region 1 Children's Mental Health this afternoon, who will be working with us to provide training. The triage tool allows for a yellow, orange, or red response, and a yellow response would indicate that we would work with the student, family, guardian to encourage them to seek a behavioral health referral. And we don't have these outlined just yet, but probably would involve us doing a follow-up phone call or connection with the family in 24 to 48 hours. Did your child receive care from someone? Did you make an appointment? That yellow response would be for a student who indicates a thought of suicide, but has no plan, has no means to, or no access to means. And so this is a child that may have a mental health concern, but is perhaps not an imminent threat. An orange triage level would indicate a follow-up through Children's Mental Health, where they would connect the student with resources. A red follow-up would be that the student is not only on a safety hold, but needs to go to the emergency room. And we could access Children's Mental Health for those services as well. Children's Mental Health is a voluntary program, so if the parent, guardian, and student are willing to engage, then Children's Mental Health can help this child. If any of those parties are not willing to participate and do not respond to a plea for follow-up, then it would be an involuntary where they would still go to the emergency room, but that would involve the SRO making that decision.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I know it's difficult decisions in a crisis, but it is important we have a clear protocol about where to go.
Yes, and we want to be very intentional about not asking our district employees to be making mental health decisions when they're not mental health providers, perhaps. So trying to make it a simple process and make sure that we are referring so that mental health professionals can make those decisions and work with students and families.
We've spent a lot of time talking about duty to warn and what does that mean and what does it not mean, and whether or not we should add specificity to the policy. And I would emphasize that this policy is one aspect of a total continuum of care when it comes to mental health, meeting the mental health needs of our students. And actually pulling some of the language out of the policy was the most impactful part of the reason that we spent time on this policy, was that it gives more flexibility to layer the levels of post-intervention and how we're going to support kids, whether they're mildly inclined or at a severe risk when it comes to suicidal ideation or thoughts. And so a policy that doesn't have flexibility just needs to state that that staff is expected to do something, gets the ball rolling. And I think that leaves us, as a part of all of the pieces that we're putting together for a complete mental health approach for our students, a governance umbrella that is just one aspect, but the top aspect of it.
So I just want to piggyback a little bit. Sorry, were you not done, Tom?
No, I was just going to say, I would like to see that tool sometime when you get it. Just could you just email that to me? I'd like to take a look at it. I just know these are tough decisions, having been a mental health professional, but it's really important that this has been a big issue with this school district and with the community, and that we have our act together really well. And I know you're working hard. I'm not being critical. I'm just saying I just really want to see the details of it. That's all.
I just wanted to flip it a little bit and think in the inverse of when a teacher or staff member is looking at, they're encountered with the situation that they know there's concerns for the student, and so they go to pull the policy and they read a policy that says they have a duty to warn with no, I know they'll likely read through the rest of it. My concern is that the duty to warn not being pointing to how or pointing to something narrowing it, you may open up a giant can of worms unintentionally. If the intention is to try to be private but protect, then I feel like by saying you have a duty to warn, it implicates law enforcement. In most community members or most people, their response is Department of Health and Welfare or law enforcement with that duty that's been imposed upon us for a long time now, statutorily. So I think I was the one that may have made the comment, and so I just put that out there to maybe have a little, if that hadn't been discussed, and if it has, then I will trust the direction you've gone, but I would be concerned that people would make it too broad to be protective of themselves not being in trouble, because the liability for not warning falls back on the individual who didn't do it right. And so that to me then is going to open it up to them feeling they need to do all warning as opposed to minimal warning that's necessary under our policy.
Yeah. So this is the exact conversation that we had, and when you start to specify who gets warned, that's a slope that once you start down, you can't. Then you're expecting expertise in diagnosing what's the severity level of the data that you have, because if it's a certain level, then do you do this, or do you just say, you know what, we've just got to call law enforcement and we've got to call our principal on every single inclination of this that happens, which could potentially be, when that's why this conversation is so complex, because all of a sudden now somebody says, oh, I flunked my test, oh my God, my parents are going to kill me. I'll just beat them to the punch or whatever. I'm not trying to make jokes about it, but that's not an abnormal statement that a student would make just out of this bad test score. And so we don't want to generate a policy that creates undue burden when we're trying to meet the needs of kids that would really need the needs met. And so that was this. I don't know how more I can specify how much it's threading the needle on meeting those needs without getting bogged down in bureaucratic paperwork. And that's why this isn't just one aspect of what we're implementing with regards to mental health. This is just the overarching policy is, what do you do when a kid reaches out in some fashion, or you recognize as a staff member that this kid's in crisis? And I think if we try to get too specific with this, it's going to interfere with our ability to respond appropriately and getting kids in front of people that are truly trained and know how to handle the situation.
Okay.
I had a general question on name an impact team. Was that your question? Oh, I'm sorry. How is this impact team selected, or do we need something just to say we're giving them a certain number of training, because we're putting a lot of responsibility on this impact team? So I didn't know if each school have their own impact team, or if you're training your teams.
So basically, this is a group of people who is already informally doing this, and so we will work with them to provide education on the Columbia Screener. We haven't had a formalized tool in the past that we have identified, and it's a very short series of questions, again with that follow-up on yellow, orange, and red. The impact team may not identify with themselves as an impact team because they haven't had a name before, but these will not be new expectations of these individuals. So we will plan to provide that education in an organized fashion. For example, the counselors have been discussing this at their meetings, the school nurses have been discussing this at their meetings, the SROs will be reaching out with them, and then the secondary assistant principals have had conversations with Trina, and we do need to meet with them still. The other group that may be involved would be school psychs. We've discussed self-select. Some would like to be part of it, and others have other duties at this time. And the traditional team at each building is the SRO, school nurse, assistant principal, and counselors working together.
Is there any kind of certification? You know, you get your ACLS and all of our certifications. Is this something that we should, you know, have a procedure that says impact team shall receive annual training on appropriate crisis intervention, or just so we know those funds are set aside for this impact team to be adequately trained?
I'm not aware of any external certification, but certainly that's crossed our mind that they need specific training on this policy and how it applies to their work and how they work with others within the building. They need QPR training. We have had conversations with local community partners on training in the Columbia Screener. Honestly, it's very simple. I'm not sure that we'll need a guest speaker to come and do that training, but that's an option that we have been discussing.
I just know you've done a fantastic job, and so the more we can get in writing and set protocol and procedure in place, that, you know, as people move here and there, that we have this and continue. And having that consistency from building to building, that we have the same process, and I think that certainly involves annual education.
I've got some questions, I guess, just around kind of the impact team and what Trustee May was just asking her. So that's a school-based team, and we have that currently. Just they may not be calling it.
Yes. So typically, when a student comes in with a concern, they may see the assistant principal first, and the assistant principal may pop out and see if the nurse is in the office or the SRO is there, or maybe a student comes down and sees the counselor. The counselor is able to connect that student with some community resources. So they are in that perhaps yellow zone that I talked about. When we have a student who is imminent harm or danger to themselves or others, we do involve the SRO. So the folks doing the work already are the ones who will continue to do the work. And we've been doing some additional training and conversation this year already.
I guess, and this is part of what Trustee Brumley was asking, I think. But if I were a staff member and I read this policy, would I know what to do? Right. And I think that's maybe what's lacking. And I don't know who made that comment. Maybe it was Trustee Brumley. But I think it's still, there's some room for improvement there. Just as I read it, I wasn't sure if the impact team was a district-based group or a school-based group. So even maybe even saying, you know, the school impact team may help. Now, if none of the schools call it that, you know, that's going to be an issue. And the other thing I just wonder, just to tie the kind of duty to warn together with this is, as you know, in the procedures portion, it's item 3 here, and it says interventions. So we're using different terminology, so maybe it's interventions, duty to warn, or something like that. And I'd rather it say staff must report to the school impact team. As, you know, just if that's the expectation that they must report. And I'm sure, fairly confident, pretty sure, if a teacher has a concern, they're not going to our 10,000 pages of policy to figure out what to do. They're going to their principal and saying, hey, I'm really concerned about so-and-so. Yeah. And so they're already doing this already, but I think, you know, I don't know, maybe it's late on a Sunday and they can't get a hold of their principal or something. You know, I think that's where it could be a little more explicit as far as what do they do.
Okay. Give us another shot at this. We'll bring it back to you. I can tell you this is there's two things that are trying to happen here, and that is, what's the overall governance of suicide intervention, suicide postvention, and prevention? What are you doing across the system? And I think as far as the implementation strategies and the things that we're taking on, we're doing that well. Now the policy gets into what are you going to do as a governance, and that's the part that the second that we start clarifying, and maybe we just title it, the duty to warn language actually comes out of statute, and it's limited to that. It doesn't expand upon that. It doesn't say who is supposed to be warned or what is supposed to be done with follow-up or what's the accountability even if you don't. And so that's part of why this is a little bit of a challenge, is that we're going to start getting a little more procedural with each step of that. And I think that's the slippery slope of making it easily managed. You know, do they know their impact team? You know, do we have to then start a full communication plan on who their impact team is, or should we just say their supervisor and then somebody? Then okay, if they didn't, you know, we didn't want to turn this into a procedural issue. And so that's what I think most of the dialogue that we've spent on this was, just make sure you tell somebody so that we can intervene on behalf of these kids. So we're glad to take it back and take another shot at this and bring it back in front of the group. I mean, we got 3 comments on it, and one of them was thanks for pulling away some of the confusing language. So it's been kind of back and forth. So we'll give it another shot and we'll bring it back in front of you guys if you want.
For me personally, I love what we've done with it, and I think it's super close. And I like the idea that we're not asking a staff member who isn't comfortable, making a judgment. They're referring to a group of people who can ask further questions, that have more training. I think that's an appropriate response. So, I like the intent and what we're doing there. I just worry, is it clear if a staff member read this policy who they're going to? So I just think a couple words would clear it up.
Okay. We'll go chew on it
So
some
do we
more and bring it
wanna
back to you.
Just bring this one back next month for approval?
Yeah.
Or is that what you're suggesting?
Get brought back, and
Dr.
I'm also
Cook?
concerned about, those kind of some specificity also protects staff. Protects. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
Something happens, we need to know they follow procedure, because the parents are going to ask that. So that's all I'm saying. There needs to be some degree of specificity, but I guess there's a balance here. So
We'll
So our kind of questions, comments mainly revolved around the procedures. Do we want to approve the policy tonight and bring the procedures back next month? So at least we have that portion of it done? Or do you want to bring them both back together?
both being brought back.
I think it would be better for us to spend some time talking about duty to warn, which lives in the policy, not just in the procedures. So if you're okay and comfortable with this, we'll table this and bring it back to our committee and then resubmit once we've got some recommendations for you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so next up, I think in our book is 5290, which was political activities and staff participation.
Oh, that was a good comment.
Yeah, I appreciated the comment we had in here. Ms. Ostrom, do you want to just come up and maybe talk about what you did with the comment there?
They added that in.
Yeah, and thanks for adding the blue. It makes it really
Yeah,
clear.
I like it
That
too.
help?
Yeah, it does help.
Yeah, I was like,
There we go.
oh,
All right. Chair Morris Royal, Superintendent Cook, members of the board. We did take advice from the comment and we added into the 5th paragraph there, which nothing in here precludes an employee from taking an available appropriate leave day for such activity so long as such activity follows this policy. So I think we covered that comment. It was a good comment.
Okay, any other questions on this one? Okay, thank you for incorporating that in there. Why don't we, since there's so many tonight, just go through our approvals too once we're done kind of questioning. So is there a motion to approve 5290 as presented? Okay, any further discussion on it? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Next up, 7218, which is a federal grant financial management.
Oh, does it have the page number in here?
And I believe we had no comments on this.
Oh, right there. Ah.
Any questions or comments on this from the board? Okay, is there a motion to approve 7218 as presented?
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and next up is, I skipped it here in my book, but 7237, retention of records and federal grants. And this was just updating, I think, Skyward. There was a word change in there where we added Skyward. Okay. Is there a motion to approve 7237 as presented?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And next up is 7270. Property records has had quite a few changes. This was from, I believe, ISBA recommendation. Okay, and I think we had no comments on this. Any questions from the board? Okay, is there a motion to approve 7270?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then next up is 7320, allowable use of grant funds.
Director of Finance.
And there was a comment on this one regarding, I think the wording of business manager, which we don't have that position anymore, it's finance director. And so as you can see from the blue marks in there, that was updated since our discussions last month. Okay, any questions on this? Is there a motion to approve 7320, 7320P1, 7320P2 as presented? Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and then 7400, which is a procurement management system. This is the final policy here, and I just had some changes reflected in, or from recommendations from ISBA, and then I believe with our some changes we made earlier in the year on purchasing limits. Okay, any questions on 7400? Is there a motion to approve 7400?
So moved.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We're done with action items and we're into information items here. Dr.
It's just about this new policy. So with the new process for the CMCG, it doesn't interfere with this, how bids are opened, and I guess it's just a different procedure.
Yeah.
You know?
Shouldn't be anything that we'd have to deal with. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Cook, you want to kick off with the first info item here, which is a Math 1 update?
Yeah, we have a short and quick Math 1 update. At the turn of the holiday season, I think we have a couple of things to share, but it's been a quiet session. Some big info getting ready to come up, though, in the next month or so. So I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Cottle to bring the Math 1 update to you.
Good evening, Chair Morris-Rowe, Superintendent Cook, and trustees. Again, with the holiday break, we really don't have too much to report. Early in December, December 10th, on the Monday morning collaboration, our Math 1 teachers met and collaborated around the Unit 4 Common lesson. This week, they are giving the Common Checkpoint Assessment for Unit 5, and on Monday the 14th, they'll be collaborating regarding that data to see what they do to adjust what they need to do to adjust instruction. We're coming to the end of our first semester. The week of January 22nd is when we will be administering the end of course assessment for Math 1. We'll be gathering that data for you. The math teachers will be meeting February 6th at their next all-day retreat, and so they will look at that end of course assessment data. They will also look at the PSAT data that you will see tonight in Dr. Nelson's presentation. And as soon as we get that data compiled, we'll get it out to you in the board memo so you can look at that and see if there's any questions, and then I'll present it to you next month so that we can see how we did. Also, just a little informational item, the NWEA Math Growth Assessment was originally scheduled. The winter window was scheduled for January. We have moved it to February. Two reasons. One is with the end of course assessment, we were basically assessing students too much at the end of the semester, but also the recommendation from NWEA was to have at least 6 weeks between assessments, and because we didn't give the original one until later in the year, it kind of pushed us back. But we'll have some more data and information coming for you soon in the board memo and next month. So are there any questions?
I had a question. A couple parents asked me about the MAP growth assessments. Now, have we communicated that information to parents they were asking me if it was coming out, and I thought it had been released, but how do they access that data?
I don't know. Do you want to speak? I know Dr. Nelson sent out a memo to parents, and so I will have him probably answer that question for you.
Chair Morris or Superintendent Cook, Trustee May, the information was actually given out in a memo format to each of our teachers. The teachers then communicated those out, and we actually gave them a stock email to be able to send out to the parents of their students as well, so that that information came out. It's not emailable, it's not something that they can log on to a portal to be able to see, but the paper should have been sent home with the students if those students did not appear for parent-teacher conferences.
Yeah, I know some parents, did not attend parent-teacher conferences and have not received that data, so I think that it's important that we find a way to communicate. It's important information that we have, and I think this parent was frustrated because she couldn't access it online through the portal, and she did not receive an email
If you don't mind passing the information on to me, I will contact the parent directly and make sure that they get a copy of the score.
Okay, are there any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cottle. Okay, now it's the Dr. Nelson show for a little bit here.
Trustees, tonight we present to you some course spacing guides for work information. We have continually worked with our content teachers to improve the content of courses that we choose to teach. Algebra 2 and ALP Algebra 2 have been redesigned similar to our work with geometry this last 2 months. Those course spacing guides were written in conjunction with teachers from Coeur d'Alene, Lake City, and Venture High Schools. They've been sent out to their colleagues for peer review, and in addition have been sent to the Idaho Regional Math Center in Pocatello. I didn't even have that down there. They will we expect to have the feedback from the Regional Math Center for you before your action expected in February. In addition, we also have redesigned digital design and introduction to yearbook, which is currently only taught at Lake City High School, for the purpose of including your district's technology graduation requirements. As you may be reminded, to graduate from a Coeur d'Alene public school, you must have a minimum of 10 hours of coding and additional 5 hours of digital citizenship. That is a local graduation requirement that our board put in 4 years ago. So we have about 8 courses right now that currently meet that expectation. If this does meet your approval next month, this would be course number 9. Again, each of those courses does have a minimum of 10 hours of coding in addition to the content that they normally provide otherwise.
Okay, and these are for information, so they'll be out for comment for the next 30 days. As you mentioned, they're going to be, hopefully we'll receive back a review in the meantime or prior to our February meeting.
Correct.
And be back for action, yeah.
Since I know we had discussed at a prior meeting maybe 2-3 months ago about switching ALP to honors, and we're potentially approving this as ALP, is that going to be somewhat confusing or no? Okay.
No. The name is simply going to be a vernacular change. We've already started doing that. In fact, in an upcoming memo, you'll receive access to our brand new course description handbook. We've moved away from separate handbooks in each of our middle schools and high schools into one, and you'll notice that all of the course titles there have been so renamed from ALP to honors for the next school year.
Okay, any other questions for Dr. Nelson? Okay, so we'll see these again next month.
Correct.
Okay, continue on, sir.
It is my pleasure to be able to stand before you and give you some information about how we are proceeding toward college and career readiness in our district. It is always interesting to take a look at some of these points of data because many times they really triangulate well to what we are doing. So right now we'd like to share with you our district's PSAT results. As a reminder, this was given back to all students in grades 9, 10, and 11 back in October. The PSAT and PSAT 8-9 for students in grade 9 has 4 sections, as you can see up on the screen, 2 sections that specifically address reading and writing, which they call evidence-based reading and writing, and 2 sections dealing with mathematics, one including a calculator and one not. We now have all of the student results, and those are now being distributed out. Overall, 93% of all of our students in those grade levels took the PSAT in our buildings on that date. Here are our results for PSAT 8-9, again just given to the 9th graders. The reason that we moved away from the national merit version of this is to have an exam more commiserate to their standards for their grade level. For the most part, we saw that results were fairly flat. The participation rate was there, but we did see a nice bump in total percentage of college and career readiness at Lake City High School from 31 to 38% this year. Coeur d'Alene High School stayed fairly flat at 47%. Overall, as a district, again, flat at 38%. For college and career readiness, meaning that 38% of our kids right now, if they were to take the NMSQT or the SAT, could be identified as college and career ready as identified by the College Board. So that's not a bad thing, but certainly we'd always like to have them a little bit higher. Our mean scores still remain, though, at about the 50th percentile. The range of scores is always very interesting to take a look at. We had 8 students who had perfect scores in either the evidence-based reading and writing or the math section, and we had about the same amount of students with very, very poor scores. So most of our students are still right around the 50th percentile. We'd certainly like to be able to have that distribution up there. We also did see a little bit of drop in evidence-based reading and writing at our schools. That certainly could be based in our brand new curricular materials and our adoption for this year, but we expect to see those going in because that is one of the hallmarks of both StudySync and my perspectives that you adopted, that they really were very aligned to those. But that's just the introduction. Let's get into the NMSQT results, which we actually did see some nice cohort growth. When I refer to cohort growth, that means we're tracking the students in grades 9 through 10 through 11. And we did see some strong cohort growth, particularly in mathematics, which is a very nice thing to be able to see based on our conversations over time. We did see that cohort growth is above the national mean, which is always good to see as well. And the percentage of students also meeting the college and career ready benchmark rose sharply for Coeur d'Alene High School in the 10th grade, up about 8% this last year, where we did see more modest growth at the district level. One of the things that I do want to share, however, is we're still not always meeting those expectations. When you see the range of scores on the left-hand side from about 160 up to 760, we've still got a lot of room that we can grow in there. So even though we did grow, we still want to see that upward trend moving in that direction. In your packets, as well as on our public website, we do have all of the results there in a table format, and anybody who's interested in taking a look at the specifics behind the data, you'll be glad to be able to take a look. May I move forward, or did your question pop up? I see
I just had a question when I was reading through these. I was
Sure.
wondering, if, do you see any correlation between how, because this is the second year now that we've given the 8-9, is that correct?
Correct.
So I guess, did you see any correlation between the 10th grade ISAT, since, is it a good indicator of how our students will perform on the 10th grade ISAT? 'Cause I know that's a big metric for us, and we're always anxious to get those results. So are these kind of a snapshot early in the year, how we can expect?
It is. There is a strong correlation between PSAT, SAT, and ISAT. So whether we're looking at the 9th grade or the ISAT to eventual SAT performance, there is a strong correlation there. It was around an 87% correlation. The nice thing is they're all measuring the same standards, right? So as long as we do that, we should expect to see that that would be a good indicator of how our results would come out. When we look at how this compares again to those college and career readiness benchmarks, again, you see that uptick that we see at Coeur d'Alene High School in 10th grade, for about an 11% increase in students who met the college and career readiness benchmark, specifically that growth in mathematics that we saw with that. Other buildings, we did see a 7% increase in Lake City High School's freshmen, and a 4% increase in Lake City High School's juniors. Overall, as a district, our juniors made the greatest stride for this year, up 4% over the previous year.
And this is comparing last year's junior scores to this year.
Correct, non-cohort, so different classes moving through.
Do you think in the future you could show some cohort scores? I think it is nice to see how our students are trending.
Yeah. If you take a look at the tables that were included in your data, I'm not certain which page they're on. I should have referenced that before I came up. You can actually track that diagonally going downward. I'd be more than glad to put it into a more concise report for you. Overall, again, our student score reports are in for the PSAT. They arrived about the second to third week of December, so it was really late for our for our counselors and their teams to be able to get them out to students. But the scores are embedded into Skyward, they're uploaded into Homeroom, and now our students will be able to get those individualized score reports back. The really nice thing about them is that they also receive their original score report, so students can actually reference back and see exactly what they missed along the way, whether that question was considered easy, medium, or hard, and they can get a free account at Khan Academy so that they can go in and actually practice skills that they were lowest on in preparation for the SAT in their junior year. Questions about the PSAT results? Is anything you'd like to see deeper or further?
No, I thought the presentation was great. I would just like to hear us or talk more about how we're communicating again with parents, and whether we're having parent nights, or you don't know what the best way to reach busy parents are. But I think you're right that there's a lot of information out there for students and parents, and how to access it might be the difficult piece. So just ideas on how we can connect parents with these results and the information on their website.
Sure, and you heard a little bit about, from Lake City High School, some of the things that they're doing as well. We usually allow our buildings to use the culture to be able to establish that communication. I'll make sure that I have some communication back to you as to really what that looks like in each building. Should we move to graduation rate? Our graduation rate is up. That's always a good thing to be able to take a look at. Over the last 4 years, since the state of Idaho has moved to the cohort graduation rate model, we've been on a good uptick. This year we are up 0.7% over the previous year. Again, this is on-time graduation rate. So once a student enters as a freshman, a clock starts, and then they have 4 calendar years to be able to graduate. So we are now at 87.2, up from the previous 86.5. We have to give some great kudos up to Venture High School. Over the past 4 years, they are up 28.5% in their on-time graduation rate. That certainly is referencing their work around moving to a trimester system so that they can actually offer more credits, and certainly the work that they're doing individually with students, because many of their students actually come in credit deficient. So great kudos to the work that is going on there. The only school that dropped for this last year was Lake City High School. They did experience a 2.7% decline, and part of that has to do with a changeover at registrar. As you may remember, this is a tough job for our registrars because they are constantly having to call schools of enrollment when a student leaves us, and that did hit that delay a little bit more because of that. But I know that their records are in place. Overall, the state of Idaho that comes in this year at 79.7, so we can be proud that we're at least 8% above that level. The final part of my report for you this evening is we do track our students once they leave us. We contract with National Student Clearinghouse, and National Student Clearinghouse starts following our students, 97% of them, wherever they enroll in a post-secondary institution. So we get quarterly reports from them about where our students are going, what programs they're studying, and what they're doing, how fast they're getting their degrees. Here's the updated information for us. A great majority of our students attend North Idaho College at least for a period of their post-secondary schooling. You can see since the year 2000, over 4,900 enrollments at North Idaho College. That is semester enrollment, so you can imagine if a student was there to receive their associates, they would be 4 of those 4,910 for 4 semesters. Following that, University of Idaho gets a good chunk, Boise State gets a few, and then from there it's all over the board. To see. These data have not changed much. We've seen quite the stronghold in the region recently. It is always unique to know that more than a quarter of the student body at North Idaho College has attended a Coeur d'Alene public school at one time. That's always very interesting to take a look at.
CNEJCU.
And I see that there's a lot of other information up there that you're intrigued by.
Just some colleges that I don't see on there.
Huh?
I know like quite a few people from our area.
Yeah. I'd be more than glad to
And
take a
now-
look at it as well. It could also be that they could be in that 3% of colleges that don't report to National Student
Probably.
Clearinghouse. It could be. In there, what are those students studying? Well, here are the most current declared majors along the way. Not unusually, general studies kind of tops the list because if students don't declare, then, well, there they are. Then you have others in business, but one of the things that you will see is a change in here is the rise of the health professions. We've now seen nursing move into the top 3, and along the way, dental assistant gets in there as well. But we are starting to see more and more of the career and technical fields, plus the health professions moving up as top programs, which of course bodes well for us as a district because of the fact that we have strong programs at K-Tech to be able to support them, at least initially. From there, what are they receiving? Well, a great majority of our students are getting associates or bachelors of science. From there, bachelors of arts are coming in. And this is where the data starts getting a little bit difficult to track because some colleges and universities will put in their degree fields as bachelors of science, and then they'll actually break it down about 5 or 6 down. You'll see BS Bis. So that really is a bachelor's of science, but they have coded it as such, so it's not the generic bachelor's of science, it's a bachelor's of science in business. Down there at the bottom of the page, you'll see also bachelor's of science in chemical or electrical and chemical engineering and mechanical engineering as well. So overall, we use this data to be able to take a look at what our students are doing, making sure that our programs are in line so that we do have a good track for students when they come in, and to really emphasize the point of our 4-year plans so that every student leaves our system with a diploma, knowing that they graduate on time and that they are fully aware of the choices that are available to them. May I stand for any questions?
Any questions for Dr. Nelson?
Question on the advanced learning program, a little segment on that. You talked a little bit about the iReady scores. Do we review those? I couldn't remember what month they would come in or if we had talked about those. I know parents get those at conference time, but I didn't know as a board if that might be on the dashboard in the future or...
Yes, it will be on our data dashboard, both iStation for language arts and iReady for mathematics. We do our benchmarking 3 times a year. I presented the iReady data to you in aggregate in I think it was expected in October and then it got bumped to November. So that data was initially presented to you. Our window just opened today, so we can expect to see probably some summative data in March for you. But I'm always glad to be able to share with you a little bit about how we're progressing.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Okay, and last up here in information items is some policies for information. There's 2 in there. 3330P, which is a student discipline policy. There was some clarification language in there. And then 5260. Why don't we do 3330P first? Is there any comment on that? Is that Dr. Cottle? I think it was just one line change there under.
Yes, good evening. There's really one minor change on page 3. We found as principals were trying to implement our drug policy, they were very confused. The language wasn't consistent. Sometimes we'll have language that says they will be recommended to the board for expulsion, and then this was inconsistent. And so it was unclear, and it came to the point where it took 3 of us to read this and try to figure out what it meant. So we thought we would clean up the language, reflect language that is written further up in the policy, so that way it's clear, you know, what actions and behaviors go to the board for expulsion and which ones do not.
Okay, and this is for information. It'll be out for comment for 30 days, and we'll see it next month for action. Okay. Okay, thank you, Dr. Call. And Dr. Cook, how about this next one here? Which was 5250 and 5260.
The abuse and neglected child reporting. It's also just a clarification on the expectations and restating the fact that it's a legal obligation for school district employees to make a report, and that that ultimately adding a line that says not only is it a crime, I think a misdemeanor, but it's also could result in termination.
Can I ask a question about that? This is one I read. I had a kind of similar question we had over the suicide one. Does a teacher becomes aware of abuse? I assume they report it to the principal, but is the teacher obligated to make the report, or themselves, or the nurse, or the counselor, or who actually? Where's the bottom line of the whole thing?
Teacher is the staff that becomes aware of the circumstance is expected to make the report. Or to make, I think the language in the statute is make the report or make the report happen, which is even up to interpretation. We've treated it as if it is the responsibility of the individual that becomes aware of it. That is their responsibility.
Okay, so a teacher wouldn't necessarily turn that over to the principal to make the report. Correct. They would make themselves.
That's
themselves.
correct.
Or I think the wording is report or cause to be reported.
Cause to be reported. Thank you. That's the right.
wording.
It's that. It's a little fuzzy on that, but the idea is that essentially making the report is the expected outcome is that the report is made, so that the kid is, or that there is notification that.
Is there any kind of team decision as a practical matter in these situations or not?
I think on occasion it does come to that point, but I think most of the time it's just treated as a make sure that the report is made.
Is the report to SRO sufficient? Or it has to go to health and welfare?
No, it can be either or and both.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't have my mic on.
You want to repeat that?
With going back to 3330P, I just said I didn't know if we were lumping vaping in with our number 8, with using, possessing, distributing, purchasing, or selling tobacco products. I wonder with the epidemic we're having and we're seeing right now, if we need to put something in there with vaping, or are we just going to?
It qualifies under where it says, what is that, page 2 of the policy?
I missed that?
Page 3, under nicotine, use of tobacco and or nicotine.
Okay.
And then it's also specifically called out in another policy. 30, say it again.
I know we talked about it before.
3340.
Vaping, okay.
We just did this 1 month ago.
Perfect.
And is it clear in there if they are mixing marijuana with these vaping? I think it's getting fuzzier for students, and I'm not sure they're getting the difference.
So
I know they're not.
we treat it all as it's a violation, right? We don't have, like, there isn't currently a chemical that can test whether or not there's nicotine available for us. So we just treat it as a reportable offense, turn it over to the SROs, and then let the SROs take care of it. And they do have the capacity to check for whether it's got THC and other chemicals in it. But
Okay, so both of those will be back next month to us. That ends our board information items. I just recalled that earlier in our ad hoc math committee, there was probably a request in there for a board liaison. I saw it was blank. Are we looking for someone for that?
kidding.
Jeez, it's kind of like the committee applications. It's awful quiet over there. Oh, the math ad hoc committee.
I do law because that is hard math.
Casey, you're good.
I'll do it. Okay. Reluctantly, I'll do it. All right, and then just one reminder, next week, a week from today, we'll be back in this room, January 14th, to discuss the elementary site selections, 5 o'clock. And Ms. Town, I think you put out a calendar invite to us on that. Yes, I have it, so yes. And I would expect, we have a couple hours put down there, and I would expect we'll use a couple hours. Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's it. There's nothing further. Meeting adjourned.